Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a Soka researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy the conversation.
Hello, my name is Kumiko Hayashi, and I am a director, producer, and educator. I'm so excited to be here with you all. I live currently in Ecuador in the Amazon rainforest, where I have a center with my partner, and I'm actually currently here in Sedona, Arizona, where I'm visiting. So thank you so much for having me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Kumiko. I'm so happy to have you here and to learn more about your journey as a director, producer, educator, and the ways in which like one informs the other. It's been an incredible I think privilege for me to even just know about we were connected right back in college, and your passion for the environment has been ever present and has only strengthened over the years, and so now to hear more about the work that you're doing, some of the exciting new developments, not only with the center that you've created with your partner, but also films, right, that you've been developing that are soon to be completed as well. So many amazing updates, and I think the why behind all of that, and why now, I think will kind of be brought out as we talk more. So thank you so much, and wanted to have this space for you to speak a little bit more about what brought you to the Amazon, in Ecuador, and what really kind of ignites this fire within you, this passion to do the work that I think a lot of people, when they hear, oh, like Kumiko left the U.S. and is in the rainforest, like no one, like who does that, right? I think it takes a certain kind of spirit, right, where you're saying, I'm going to do this. If it's not me, then who else is going to do this? It's very inspiring, and I can't wait to have our listeners hear more about your journey. So please, wherever you feel like is a good starting point, let's do that, and have you speak a little bit more about yeah, what brought you to the rainforest?
Yeah, thank you so much. So, I had the honor to have graduated from Soka University of America, where the mission is really to foster global citizens. And so I had the opportunity to study Spanish, and I went to study in Ecuador my junior year first semester. And I absolutely fell in love. I remember seeing a display of all of the different places where you could study abroad. And I saw Ecuador, I just saw vast mountains and the jungle and the coast. And I started to research more about Ecuador and saw how it's one of the most biodiverse places in the world with, so many different bioregions and habitats. And so, originally I went and studied a semester. And then after graduating, I really had no plan. Many people when they're graduating, they have it all mapped out exactly what they're going to do. And I actually took a very different approach where I actually just let go, so many years of schooling and planning and, what's next. And I really felt to just let all of that go and not have a quote unquote plan, exactly mapped out. And I just really felt after graduating that it was a time for, really like an exploration of absolute freedom where I could operate in a different system that wasn't a system of knowing all the answers before, getting there. So I basically got a one-way ticket to Ecuador and with no plan, of course, sort of just getting there. I had some old friends that I had met from the study abroad, and one thing led to the next, and I found myself at this gathering in the middle of the world, which, Ecuador actually means equator. So it was a very powerful place, and there were leaders from all over the world that had come, many of them indigenous leaders. and they gathered for 4 days to pray for world peace, which was really in alignment with the values that I went to school with. And so, while it was familiar, this idea of world peace and dialogue, it was the first time that I actually witnessed so many ceremonies of indigenous peoples from all over different cultures. And so I had sort of like an aha moment where I really felt called to understand more about them, living with them. And so I had my camera, I had some experience with filming. I always was very passionate about it. And I went out, I thought it would be just a couple months, of basically being welcomed into these indigenous communities where they provided food, they provided housing. It was very much community based living. So, anyways, I thought it was going to be just a couple months. It turned to, over 5 years. And those 5 years brought me to many different countries as well, not just Ecuador, but North America, Central and South. And then 5 years later, I met the Siakopai, where I was able to really go deep into the specific region in the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador. And, all of this was a part of this film. So the film, called The Roots Awaken, originally was just, going to be sort of an exploration of my personal journey, meeting these indigenous peoples. And it turned into a much deeper story, a story of searching for identity, a sense of belonging, and includes a micro and a macro level of both a personal narrative and a macro narrative of this community in the Amazon rainforest, who at the same time where I was searching for my own sense of belonging, they were also in this battle to return to the original land where they came from, which is on the border of Peru and Ecuador. It's a fascinating story. And so they were displaced. They were actually removed from their land of origin. And so the film also follows their journey in their determination to return back to the land where they came from. So it's really interesting because there's two parallel stories happening at the same time, one of a personal and one of a community. And so that's basically how this all, started. And really amazing how it was so much more beautiful than I could have imagined, 10 years ago. So I feel really appreciative to have had this, sort of global experience, something that I learned about that I was actually able to put into action.
Wow. Wow, thank you so much. It's so inspiring because I already know, much of, like, the different, like, major points, especially, right, the starting point with SUA. You were, like, 1 year kind of, like, from the class above, but, like, to see, like, this I think as you put it, like, this kind of, like, I don't know, like exploration, like this freedom of, like, just, following your heart and coming across incredible peoples, and also these kind of gatherings, seemingly kind of like once in a century. It feels like moments where now is the time, and we need to like really pool our efforts and take action for the sake of kind of the wider community of indigenous populations and peoples. So to be a part of that, it's I think there's no coincidence. Right? We don't believe in coincidences. Understanding, like, the kind of like, our also more context. Both of us practice the same Buddhism, and that I think that also underlies and underpins a lot of why I think this work is so meaningful, because it ties into a deeper mission. And you were talking about your study abroad. I thought maybe we can rewind the clock and maybe like focus a little bit more about that. So there was maybe what it sounds like, this initial attraction to Ecuador because of nature, because of, as you described it, right? Like there's like mountains, there's jungles, there's ocean, so many things. But like what would you say was your relationship to nature at that point, in terms of what initially attracted you? And how has that relationship with nature evolved and changed over the years, now that you've really been immersed for an extended period of years? So I'm just curious about, thinking about Kumiko back then, looking at, the study abroad brochure and being like, that looks beautiful, to then now Kumiko, what is that relationship with nature like?
Yeah, great. So Originally when I was studying abroad and I was attracted to this, beautiful sort of romanticized vision of nature, I think we all have this feeling of belonging when we're outside in the park or, walking in our favorite place in nature. So I really felt in the US this disconnect from the environment in a sense. Like, of course, there's different places to go walking or hiking, but I really felt like there was some sort of mystery or something much more profound in Ecuador that was calling that I wanted to grasp. It was like something almost like you see on a movie, right? When you're watching it and you feel this like longing, this sort of calling towards that. So when I went to Ecuador, my relationship with nature was very much in a seeking state where I felt like there was something that I needed outside of myself that, somehow I didn't have within. And so I was very much in the seeking state and exploration, quite an adventure, to be honest. And the more that I spent time in Ecuador, the more that I spent time with these indigenous communities, I was able to gain wisdom through experience, where I was able to live in a way of community that is very interrelated with the natural environment and is not sort of seen as this romanticized idea or like separation of, oh, I need to go to nature because I'm somehow not a part of it when I'm not, walking in the park or something like that. So the more I deepened my relationship, I could see and feel how the living world around us is embedded really in every moment. And I can give an example of that. So before going to Ecuador, I didn't have this understanding of deep community and what that means to live in community with nature. And the indigenous peoples in Ecuador, they have this concept called minga, which is basically, you've got a community with different families, extended family. And so one person will perhaps need help gardening. Maybe they want to plant some corn or different medicinal plants. And so they will call a minga. And what they will do is they'll invite, all of the surrounding families and people in their community to come help them. And they will provide food. Usually they have chicha, which is like a fermented sort of, jungle beer or like kombucha. And they'll really just have a good time and they'll share food and drink and everyone helps out. Maybe you have 50, sometimes 60 people helping you. And so in one day, you'll get done, all of that work that you need. And then maybe the next week, there's another family that wants to sort of, build a garden shed or they need some sort of work, with their house. And so they'll call a minga and they'll do the same thing. And they sort of rotate with these mingas where they all help each other. And that system of rotation, it takes care of everyone's needs. They have food, they have everything they need to get their work done. And there's not money involved. It's a system of sharing and giving. And a lot of those mingas are very much involved with nature where they're either harvesting, they are, in relationship with the environment around them. And so that's just one example of a concept called minga, which I feel is actually very much a part of the natural systems. If you look at nature, it's funny because, nature, there's no like banks or ATMs. It's not like, the frog goes to the river is like, oh, here, let me give you $5 so I can like bathe in the river, right? There's like a reciprocal relationship intrinsic between plants, animals, mountains that is constantly in exchange of energy. And it's so natural, right? And so growing up in the Western world, in a system of living where there is these transactions or this sort of idea of relationships that almost feels separate a lot or kind of like divided or compartmentalized. The more I spent time in nature, I was able to see how interconnected energy and everything is in its natural state. And so by the end of the study abroad, let's like go from study abroad fast forward, many, many years later, I no longer sensed myself like seeking nature or somehow like reaching for it. I realized inside of my own self, this awakened state that is nature, and that like no matter where I go or where I am, this awakening to this intrinsic connection where I no longer was seeking, outside of myself for that feeling or that satisfaction, and just realizing that, in all moments and all spaces, I am essentially, one with it. So that was, in essence, the change of perspective that happened over time.
Wow, that was incredibly profound, and well said too. I mean, I feel like you really like took us through this evolution from the romanticized images of Ecuador on a brochure, probably, and then seeking outside of yourself to recognizing and awakening to that interior, like that internal. I mean, kind of state that you know all of this is one kind of like living, breathing, I don't know, entity, organism, spirit. I, there's probably more that you can even speak to that. But I feel that, all the work that you're doing right now really kind of documents that initial adventure. I mean, I still think it's an adventure in that, like, what will come of this? It's still kind of to be seen in terms of how you then present this to a wider audience, or maybe gift it is a better way of saying it, right? Because this is truly something that I think comes in stark contrast to what a lot of people living here in the United States or like the quote unquote Western world, how we operate. It's just very different, right? The whole thing about transactions, this for that, competition that then comes from scarce, limited resources. It just feels like these these two approaches are like kind of diametrically opposed to one another. Do you like what are the ways in which you feel that tension, in terms of like, like when you're not right now in the United States, right? And so you're immersed, or you've been brought back and re-immersed yourself in this system, right? In this way of thinking. How do you kind of like reconcile between those two different worlds that you're navigating? And then maybe speak a little bit more to like, it seems like you're trying to create this bridge between them, not only through your own like presence and what what you do and like interacting with people, but also through your film. So maybe you kind of speak to again like these two things are so different. Is it about building bridges or is it about merging? And like, what's the tendency, like, what's the problem of like one overpowering the other, which is probably already what's happening, right? Which is like the larger struggle. But like, could you maybe like articulate that, you know, that situation that's been happening for quite
Yeah,
some time now?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So there's a prophecy. Many have heard of it. Some maybe this is the first time. It's called the eagle and the condor prophecy. So this is a prophecy that was spoken about in different indigenous communities, actually throughout the Americas, throughout North, Central, and South. And this eagle condor prophecy speaks of this time which we're currently in which the eagle of the North, it sort of represents the people of the North, you could say, this world or the Western world or United States or Europe. And basically, this eagle represents the sharpness and vision. It represents, in a sense, this like fast paced, getting things done perspective. And it also represents technology. So it represents this movement, development, yeah, everything around this technological world. And then you have the condor, excuse me, of South America, which represents this feminine energy, you could say, this intuition, this sort of time without time, the energy of like sort of going with the flow. And the condor represents the heart, and the eagle represents the mind. And so a lot of the peoples of South America are seen is as this sort of feminine in the sense of like softness, right? Like yin yang energy. And then in the north, the eagle representing the mind or more of like a masculine. And so this prophecy says that this time will come, which is a time that we're currently in, when the eagle of the north and the condor of the south will fly together again, wing to wing in balance, right? So this metaphor I feel is really beautiful for what's happening and also in my personal experience witnessing it, because one is not, they're not good or bad, right? I think that the north has this really beautiful aspect of, yeah, productivity, development, sharpness of vision. And the South has this beautiful aspect of the intuition and going with the flow. So it's not about having one or the other or having to choose between them or compete with them. It's really about finding a balance again in this, again, like a yin yang balance, right? Many cultures have this concept of, yin and yang, or like this duality that's in balance. And so I think rather than, yeah, if kind of choosing, or me being, for instance, like back in North America and struggling or feeling like, oh my gosh, like I'm in a different world, or going back to the Amazon and like missing things from the North, I feel it's really about coming into balance and harmony with the two aspects. And I do think it is a lot of bridge work. There is bridging because there's people who really may not even understand or have forgotten this way of operating in the condo, right? It's like, there's a meeting and you have to show up. And in North, it's like you're on point, you're on time. South America, people show up like 30 minutes later. People get offended, or like an hour later. Oh my gosh, you don't respect me. Like what's going on? But it's just a cultural difference because for the people that's out there, much more relaxed. There's not this pressure of time. They sort of go with the natural flow of how things unfold. Whereas in the North, there's very much this sort of idea of having to be, precise, on point. And so I think that there is some room for this bridging between cultural differences or between different perspectives. Again, one perspective is not correct. It's not like one is better than the other, but finding commonality and understanding. So I do think a lot of my work is also being a bridge between these different cosmovisions or perspectives of life, and finding a way for, in a sense, them to fly together, right? So rather than one dominating the other, finding a way where they can really come to an understanding, which oftentimes is through dialogue, like this podcast, being able to just really share ideas and come to an understanding. And a lot of the times I do feel when I'm in the North, I come much more from that condor perspective, and people are like, Kumiko, like, you're so relaxed, and, what's going on? Share with us, how are you, this way. And then I'm able to share, some of the things that I've learned, and that can help them as well. And when I'm in the South, people are very, they admire like my productivity and efficiency, and ability to like move energy and get things done. And they ask me like, how are you able to do those things, so that I share with them some of the perspectives. So yeah, I do think there's a lot of bridging, right, to be able to come to an understanding. And I also think that we all actually have both condor and eagle energies within us. And so it's really about each person, coming into their own balance so that they feel that peace and that inner state, of harmony. So that's a little bit of, um, my experience. And I think that that prophecy really is an amazing like metaphor for this time.
Truly, truly it is. And I appreciate you sharing that because it gives this visual, I think very much like, and it's a visual out of nature, right? Of like these two birds, both like so different, right? And yet majestic in their own ways. And then what you're talking about is the energies, right? And the ways of being, uh, they they operate completely different, and yet they're both flying wing to wing. That's kind of the goal. And I love what you shared about you like it's like really concrete examples of how you embody or you bring together these different energies, almost like you're taking like the hand of one and then the other, and then you're just kind of saying like, hey, let's get to know each other. Let's, through understanding one another, maybe we can find qualities that we respect about the other, and then that mutual understanding can then breed like this like feeling of like interconnectedness. Maybe it's the friendship, um, admiration, and then like working together. So yeah, when you're kind of like navigating, these different worlds and going here and then bringing a certain energy that people take note about, and then vice versa, it's such a wonderful way to also like put on display that we as like individuals are so much more capable than we probably give ourselves credit for, because we're not necessarily I mean, I think like inherently, like we have that capacity, but it takes effort to put yourself in new situations and new circumstances where, yeah, I've definitely felt this going to Brazil, and just kind of being like a buzzkill because I would get upset that they were not on time. And I would be like wondering, what the heck, you know? It's like Scott against literally the entirety of Brazil. So who do you think is going to win? Of course, you have to go with the flow, and then that's kind of actually like the bigger lesson of like that letting go process, and then seeing how you yeah, that through that process you change yourself. So you know, this discussion about like, you know, eagle, condor, different energies, yin and yang, it's beautiful and it's so much needed, but we're not quite there yet. And in fact, you know, now the image is like, you know, there's like the eagle attacking like the condor and they're like fighting in midair. And you know, there's been a lot, right, to say about the relationship that the West has had with any, you know, like basically thinking of nature as like property and like something to be extracted from, and then disregarding a lot of like the peoples who live there and are caretakers of that just doesn't really compute, and it gets in the way of, you know, profits and all that stuff. So I guess my question is, with all that has happened in terms of like that, you know, kind of like capitalistic, imperialistic, extractivist, all of that narrative that the eagle has, um, how is it that they can still fly wing to wing? Is the onus on the condor to say it's all good, right? Don't worry, we can still be friends? Or is it the eagle that has to have their own reckoning? And it feels like there's still this balance of like kind of coming to equilibrium or like resolution, that there's still a gap. And so could you speak to that like very difficult reality and also history?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question because looking at the reality today, there is still so much extractivism and, you know, racism and domination. So we can't really sweep it under the rug, right? I think that is important, like you said, to really recognize that there's still that going on. And I think the change in this metaphor comes from the realization that the people of the North, there's so much is in this metaphor of the eagle condor in their head. It's the people are very much in their mind, thinking, analyzing, and what it's going to take is for them to come back to their hearts and to awaken to the feeling, to the emotion, to the intuition. So, in a sense, it's the eagle awakening that the condor is actually also within. So, I know we're getting kind of complex with all of these birds, but like to kind of step back, it's this idea, right, that it represents the mind, and the people of the North are out of balance between their heart and the mind. So they're much more in their head and they're so little in their heart, right? And perhaps you could say the same about the people of the South. There's so much in the heart that maybe they're not, you know, thinking as much. But I think the process of change is that the people, all people awaken that we all have both a heart and a mind, and that when we as an individual come into that balance of being able to live really through the heart and using the mind to assist. But the reason things are still out of balance is that so much of the decisions that are being made, especially by these large corporations, politicians, is that they're using their mind to analyze, you know, how much profit can we make by you know, for instance, mining in South America because, you know, it's cheaper. We can just dispose all the chemicals without having to clean up the mess. Where in North America, there's all these regulations. So they go to the South as this sort of way to be a bully, really. They're bullying because they think that they're superior, and that doesn't matter, that they just destroy the environment for the sake of their own profit, right? So it's very much just like analysis in their head. They have the spreadsheets. Okay, we're going to save X amount of money by going to South America and, in a sense, like just deforesting the Amazon in Brazil or Ecuador or wherever. And so they're not coming from a place from their heart, right? Because if they were coming from a place from their heart, they could feel the impact that their decisions would have on the environment and the local people, and they would really feel that same effect within themselves of like, oh my gosh, like, you know, why would I go dump all of these chemicals into nature? Like, I wouldn't want someone to dump chemicals into the park that I go to every weekend that I enjoy. And so there is this calling for a return to operating from the heart with the mind, And I think that that's going to be the transformation for this ability for them to fly together, in balance. And so oftentimes, even in the South, they're needing this, energy of the mind because people have got, all of this amazing nature. They live in harmony. They've got rivers, they've got gardens, but like those are being threatened. So they feel it with their heart, but they don't know how to actually, have the tools to protect the environment. They're really seeking like knowledge in this mind of rationale of like how to do A, B, and C. And so something that's really beautiful that's happened is like, for instance, that seeking nature has brought certain technologies into the Amazon where they're using drones to actually like monitor their land. So they're like learning how to fly these, you know, drones to like monitor, and they have got camera traps, and they've implemented technology to protect nature. So that's something really cool to see where they're using that mindset or ego to like actually protect nature. And I think the question of the North is like, how can people come back to their hearts? And it's funny because I like see nowadays a lot of sort of, you could say like affluent people who maybe have like their own businesses or like really successful, who are like actually seeking like indigenous plant medicine, like for instance like this like ayahuasca fashion, right? Like I've seen a lot of like CEOs of businesses who are like going on these like ayahuasca retreats, right? Which is so funny because they're actually like seeking because they feel that there's something missing. They've got all of their data and their spreadsheets, and they've got their successful business, but they're realizing that like there's something missing from the heart and from the spirit. So they're going now actually to South America seeking plant medicines and seeking indigenous knowledge um to heal, right? And I think that's a whole other topic. We could probably do a whole podcast just on sort of the ayahuasca piece, but not to go into it because that's a whole complex discussion on its own. In a positive sense, like a lot of people are seeking ancient wisdom. Let's call it ancient wisdom, right? And so I think that in a positive way, that's actually helping. Like there's also these cacao ceremonies. People are looking for, cacao is basically chocolate. It's just the original form where you don't put a lot of sugar or milk. It's just pure chocolate. And they're doing these ceremonies where they're drinking the cacao or chocolate to awaken their heart because it actually is a plant that opens your blood vessels and literally pumps more blood through your heart so that you feel. So this is something really positive where people in North are like doing these cacao or chocolate ceremonies to come back to their heart. And so I think both are happening equally North and South, right? And so I do see this positive movement happening where people are able to open up enough to realize that there's something that they can learn from the other.
Amazing. Just, there's so much that I want to address, like kind of identify from what you just shared. But quick aside, when we were both studying at SUA, in that study abroad period came about. It happens in our third year, and I recall you coming back from Ecuador, and I was planning my trip to go actually to Peru, and you said, "Hey, you should go to Ecuador because it's they're neighbors," and you recommended an eco lodge that I go to. And just check it out and just be in like the rainforest in Tena. So I thought, yes, adventure, let's go. And then actually over there, that's when I experienced like the cacao ceremony. So I can really like speak to like how like that the physical and like the mental and the spiritual are like really trying to kind of align itself, especially in the backdrop of like nature where it's just trees for miles. And it is something like where like it's difficult to let go, right? Because there's this sense of like I'm not in control, from like this immediate sense, but that's not really the point of it. It's the interconnected sense. So it just really illustrates, I think, what you're talking about, these kind of seemingly like almost like antagonistic energies that actually are operating within this larger sphere, that's trying to bring them together, and yet they still kind of like fight against each other and resist that. And then there was also like an opportunity for ayahuasca. I did not do that, but maybe in the future, I don't know. But these are like powerful, like you said, like ancient wisdom. This is meant to serve like that deeper connection that I think we're all yearning for. And you know, one thing that I wanted to also bring up, and wanted to hear your thoughts about this, because you know you brought into this conversation the prophecy of the eagle, condor, and then you've also clarified about what they represent, the energies that they possess, and how that actually manifests in very concrete ways in our day to day living. And I think that's so helpful. And we see you know the kind of like you know kind of one sidedness that you know people might feel of like I'm a little bit more in the head space and not the heart space, and vice versa, and all the kind of different like gradations of like where they end. um, but would you say that in the context of you know conversation about global citizenship, would you say that it's actually about trying to kind of like bring those two poles to like equilibrium, and having both the mental, but then also the heart space? Is that what you would say kind of drives a global citizen, and what most of us, if not all of us, should be operating from a place of?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, all human beings on this planet, excuse me, all people, we have a heart and a mind, right? So we all have this capacity, potential to use both. And maybe one has been sleeping, but there's really an ability to come into balance with both. And so I think, in terms of global citizenship, that this is really important, the balance between the heart and the mind. And to be able to have that balance in essence, to also be able to respect the differences, right? So going back to a little bit of the root problem, I think a lot of the core issue that is happening, especially between North and South, is discrimination and racism. Is It's really racism because it's one race or one people thinking that they are superior or dominant to another people's, right? So that they can take advantage of them or they can suppress them. And so fundamentally, I think that the solution is really a deep respect for all life. And that's, in essence, the key to global citizenship, is to really see all other forms of life and people in a respect where they can exist and be different. I don't know if you've heard of this saying, like, we can agree to disagree. I don't know. Have you heard of that? Yeah, so sometimes you're talking to someone, you're like, you just want peace. So you're like, all right, let's agree to disagree. And that way you can just be in peace, right? So there's also another prophecy we haven't talked about, but I'll briefly mention it. It's called the rainbow prophecy, which is this time that we're coming into also, where you see like a rainbow. It has all the different colors, and each one exists equally. Red, blue, yellow, green, violet, and they exist together, right? So if you look at that in terms of global citizenship, each culture, they have their own color and they're beautiful as they are. And actually, in humanity, we literally have these four races, which is the black race, the white race, the yellow, which is sort of Asia, and the red race, which would be like the indigenous peoples. So there's just also like, yeah, these four races. I mean, there's probably different shades between them. We got tan and other colors as well. But that they all can exist harmoniously together. And I think that's this concept of global citizenship, that you do not need to be red if you're yellow. Like, red can be red and yellow can be yellow. And you can just understand and recognize that there's a difference in the color, but that they can coexist. Like, that's when you say a rainbow, is when there's a moment of absolute harmony, peace, joy. Then you like always, I don't know if you see a rainbow, but it's usually when there's these times of like really absolute balance. And so I think global citizenship is coming into this rainbow frequency of coexistence, of diversity. And so that's what it's going to take, especially for people from the north, the south, like, just honoring that there's those differences, but that there's an end to this energy of domination, of superiority, or like my way is the highway, or I'm right and you're wrong. And just recognizing that when there's a difference, like that's beautiful, right? The diversity that we have on our planet, I think, is what makes humanity so rich, because of how many cultures and languages, and like, would anyone want just one language or one culture, right? That would be so boring. Like, imagine if our planet was just all one color, it wouldn't be any fun. So, I really feel that moving into global citizenship is about respecting diversity and allowing each culture to thrive in their own essence, right? And being able to share. And I think that's the ultimate point of the evolution we were talking about a little bit earlier is like that bridge, like allowing all of that to be and like for us to all enjoy it. So if you go to like a cultural festival, I know I went to one in Ecuador when I started my journey and I saw so many different cultures. You see different dances and foods, and it's so rich, right? When you can like witness so many different types of songs and music, and like how much more joyful it is when you're able to enjoy all of these other cultures that maybe are not your own, but there's still an understanding. Like when you hear music from all different places around the world, even if it's you're not speaking the language, or it's not understandable, like the words, like you can still feel, right, the frequency when you hear a song from Africa or from South America or from Asia. So we can all resonate in music, and I think there's universal languages like that that connect people. Dance, music, art, film. These are all modalities that I think can really allow this concept in global citizenship to thrive.
Amazing, amazing. I'm what I'm taking from what you shared is that we need to step into this rainbow frequency of respect, coexistence, and harmony. And that just sounds so cool. Like who doesn't want to step into a rainbow? Rainbows, they have this kind of, well, I mean, rainbows have become very politicized as well, right? So that's also tying to what you were addressing about these like kind of like, you didn't say root evils, but I think we can agree, right? Racism, discrimination, that which pins us against each other and makes us feel like we are better than the other, um, is going away from this kind of process that you're speaking about of like mutual respect and coexistence, right? And so, but like this rainbow, it's like it's also it represents joy. It represents this kind of miraculous event, right? Where you see it and people immediately go into this state of awe. Like, whoa. Like double rainbow, right? That like video throwback. Anyway, not like that's not. It's again like it evokes something from within. It's not necessarily like just seeing it, but it's like experiencing it. And I think that's another message that I think I'm taking away from what you shared about is that it's not enough. Again, like we're coming from like the mind space here in the West. It's not enough to like understand it intellectually. I think the heart place actually is the experience of like how it becomes embodied, how we're able to be that much more attuned to our emotions and feelings, right? Because not just the CEOs, even myself, like connecting with my emotions. Ooh, that's could be a tall order. It can be difficult sometimes, but like that becomes the solid ground from which we are able to then really see the other, um, have empathy for the other as well, and then take action as a result of that connection, rather than just immediately severing that connection and then running away, or like stealing something from their pockets and then running away, which is again kind of the way things have played out for many years. And I just appreciate you sharing about that rainbow prophecy as well. Um, Even the word prophecy, I think it's just such a loaded word, but it's also such a beautiful word. And that in the context that I think these indigenous peoples are speaking to, it actually comes from a place of like hope. What it sounds like, that they're like saying we're not quite there yet, but like that's the destination, and like that's the kind of world that it's not that like of course they want to live in it, right? But they're thinking future generations. I
Right.
want my grandchildren and my grandchildren's grandchildren to live in that world as a result of a prophecy that we're seeing play out in real time. What are we doing? And you're a part of that, which is awesome. And you're a global citizen. So, part of me wants to ask another follow-up question about that, because, this, kind of bringing together of like hearts and minds. And, you shared about, initially having this attraction to Ecuador and like going there. And then, there were various different events that led you to like just I don't know, like anchor yourself there, right? There's more to see. There's people that I'm meeting that I need to learn from them. And then you became part of a community there with the Sekopai. Um, could you like hone in on like one particular moment where you felt that alignment really solidify? I mean, I know you talked about this gathering of indigenous peoples, and I think that probably was a very defining moment for you. But I don't know if it's that moment or some time after that where you just really felt like very like absolute conviction. This is my mission. This is my alignment, and this is like a new starting point that you're departing from, where it's no longer about the external seeking, but also you hadn't quite gotten to that place of like interconnectedness. Could you like maybe speak to like that particular moment, because I feel like that would say a lot about, again, like your understanding of global citizenship.
Sure, yeah. Well, actually, there's so many moments. So I will just actually pick one that happened recently where we were able to actually see each other and reconnect while we're here on this podcast at this Global Citizenship Educational Conference that just happened, right, at Soka University. People from all over the world, different backgrounds. And, that was just last week. So it's an experience I can share that just happened. And I was able to share this more in depth through a presentation. And it was, really interesting, being in that same room where I was like 10 years ago, listening to professors speak about these concepts, about what we've basically talked here on this podcast and in summary. And then it switched where I was no longer sitting, in the chair, and I was actually the one up on the podium speaking and sharing the really accumulation of this entire journey over 10 years. And so that was an aha moment where I was really comfortable sharing everything. Sometimes when you're in college, you remember that feeling where like you do a presentation, you're kind of just winging it, like you're like putting all these concepts up, and you're like, okay, like, but you don't really feel it. So I hope this is gonna go okay, like that people will get it, and that sort of insecurity. So I'm sure all of us have had those moments when we've presented, way back when in the university. So but this was totally different. It was like everything that I was sharing, I felt, I thought about, it was like really this mind heart harmony. And, hearing the feedback from a lot of professors that, I looked up to 10 years ago that were then complimenting me and like, wow, like you've really embodied this. I was really happy because it was an aha moment of like, okay, this is a confirmation. Sometimes I'm just by myself and I can wonder, am I progressing or am I embodying this? And to hear so many people that I respect that are also doing such amazing work around the world themselves in global citizenship, to hear them, really sincerely thank me, not just because they felt the presentation was great, but they also said a lot of the facts that you presented were really powerful. So it actually felt to me like this moment where both the mind and heart were together, where like I wasn't just sharing an experience from feeling, I was also backing it up with like real information that showed that this was really powerful. So that was really cool to experience that. We got to reconnect, and that's why we're here on this podcast. So, just one effect after the other. And sometimes it's hard for me to come out and share because I'm so used to just sort of being in my space and doing my movement. But I really appreciate this podcast. I appreciate you for the invitation because I think the next step is that when one comes into that embodiment of, you could say, like, mastery in the sense of like really embodying a concept, the next step is then to share with others, right? Because we all have it, we all have this capacity. So sometimes it just takes someone to spark some wisdom or spark a memory, and for people to realize, wow, I can do that too. And I think that's really the purpose of why I made this film and why I was able to do all of these different projects, is really to inspire hope, like we were talking about earlier, in other people. Because I really feel that we all have the capacity to do this in our own way, in our own walks of life, in our own, chosen professions. So, yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of hope that we still have today with all of the beautiful things that are happening, like, these conversations here. So thank you.
I'm so inspired, and your presentation truly was so just groundbreaking. I mean, there's no other word for it. Who else is doing what you're doing in the Amazon in Ecuador with the Secopai people? It's very much needed. It's incredible, the dialogic process of like kind of not just like being part of it, but then yeah, like you're saying, getting to a place of like confidence, conviction in your mission as a global citizen, to then share that and to share it in the way that you did. There's no going back. I think is kind of the feeling that I'm getting. Right, this is like a new departure point with a new feeling of responsibility, and you carry that so well. So congratulations, Kumiko, you're amazing, and so happy to have you on this podcast as well. I always ask my guests for a recommendation of any sort, and you've been hinting at this movie, the Roots Awaken. If I might be so bold, could you maybe just speak for briefly about where you're at with that movie, that film, and yeah, and then recommend it for all of our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, so it's been a journey, and the Roots Awaken is coming out. So first, we're going to be releasing it this year into film festivals. So, anyone that's interested can go to the rootsawaken.com and subscribe to our newsletter, and you'll get information about, where you can see it and where it will be shown. So we will do a little bit of a tour, to major cities, and depending on where the film festivals are, where we're going to present it, we will first, do a physical showings, and we might even do some community events where we, invite people. Maybe we'll have some cacao or something as well there, some refreshments for everybody. And so that will be our first, phase, and then it will go online after that. So we're not sure which platforms, but if you subscribe on the newsletter, you'll get the information of where you can see it, and would be so excited for everyone to watch The Roots Awaken. And if you'd like to see another work that I've produced that is online and available, you can look up Women of the White Buffalo. I think it's on iTunes and some different platforms. So you can Google Women of the White Buffalo. And that's another film that I was able to be a part of and produce, which is about the Lakota Native American women here in the United States and their journey for revitalization and reconciliation in their culture. So if you're eager to watch something, then that one is ready, and The Roots Awaken will be coming out soon. So we're excited to, yeah, share with everybody. It's been, so many years of just really heartfelt dedication. So we're excited to launch it into the world soon.
I'm so excited myself, and congratulations! It's such an incredible achievement, having this movie be just about wrapped up, and then presented at all of these different film festivals. And I've no doubt that it's going to be inspiring. It's going to be exactly what the world needs to hear. And please, everyone, go to it's therootsawaken.com or rootsawaken.com.
The Roots Awaken. Yep.
Yes, go there and subscribe to the newsletter. Thank you so much, Kumiko. I really, really appreciate having you on this podcast. Like you said, to reconnect in person and continue to make these causes and deepen these connections even after the conference. It's such an honor and privilege and joy. And with that, I wanted to give you the last words. Any final thoughts or just send offs to kind of close up this amazing conversation?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to all the listeners. I really feel that this is an amazing time. Even though there's, so much conflict and suffering, I think that this is a time to really reinvigorate hope and to align with what resonates with the heart, right? And then we use the mind, and we use all of the strategies and tools that we have in this world to really support that. So I know sometimes people feel like, hesitation or fear to follow their heart, and it sounds kind of cliche, but I really feel that this, this energy of like unknowing and vulnerability, and you could say risk, is actually the space where infinite possibilities exist, right? So sometimes all it takes is that one step forward of like, okay, I really feel this is what I want to do, and trusting that, and really the rest will follow. So I think that's the one thing I really want to embed in everyone that's listening is, that just following that feeling can open up, infinite possibilities. So thank you so much.